So, yeah, okay, Hare Krishna. Let's chant Mangalacharanam prayers, and then we'll read the rest of chapter 9, Resident of Vrindavan. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Jnana Timirantasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaturambalatam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopisam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaisnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Ishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhayevacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paschatade Satarine. Who'd like to start reading?
I still need to find the place, so I won't go first if that's okay. I'll just get my bearings.
We can kick it off because we're here. We've got it, yeah? Okay. Abai warned that legal action could be taken against such a religious fraud. But Bhagwat Week continued and hundreds were cheated. While the professed followers of Vedic culture were being baffled in their allegiance, modern westernized Indians were rejecting Vedic culture as backwards and irrelevant. There was Prime Minister Nehru, who wasn't at all spiritually inclined. He was for modernization and for what Abai called made in London ideas. At least Mahatma Gandhi, although he had never responded to Abai's letters, had been spiritually inclined, but not so his follower, Pandit Nehru. Still, out of concern for the way India's leaders were rejecting their country's spiritual heritage, Abai decided to write Pandit Nehru. Although in Bombay, Abai was practically homeless, in August of 1958, he boldly wrote the Prime Minister, expressing his conviction that India's spiritual culture must not only be revived at home, but also be distributed to the West. He reminded Pandit Nehru that from ancient Greece down to the atomic age, the Western world had seen only materialism and had therefore never known peace. If Nehru were to continue following the path of materialism, the only results would be strife and war. Therefore, India may not waste her time in imitating the Western way of life. You have admitted that that the position of Indian culture is of high order, but at the same time, you want to bring in material prosperity by scientific advancement of knowledge. But what is that scientific knowledge? Spiritualism is also advanced scientific knowledge. Material advancement of scientific knowledge cannot even give material prosperity to the people in general. Do you think that horseless carriage or telephonic or radio communication or any other such ephemeral facilities of life can bring in material prosperity. No, it cannot. Material prosperity means the people must have sufficient to eat or to maintain the body very soundly. Do you think that your different plans have brought in that material prosperity, or that modern Western civilization can bring in that prosperity? Even they are given that facility, the unrest will continue to go on till there is spiritual satisfaction of life. That is the secret of peace. Even without having been to the West, Abai expressed his conviction that the Americans and even the Russians were hankering for spiritual realization. They couldn't have become satisfied merely with material advancement. Pandit Nehru, therefore, should help his friends in the West by offering them spiritual knowledge from India. Poverty means poverty of knowledge. Prime Minister Chanakya used to live in a thatched cottage, but he was the dictator of India during the time of Chandragupta. Mahatma Gandhi voluntarily accepted the way of living of the so-called poor man and was the dictator of Indian destiny. But was he poverty-stricken? He was proud of his spiritual knowledge. Therefore, spiritual knowledge makes a man really rich man, and not the radio set or the motor car, etc. Back in the 1930s, the Nehru family had bought their medicines from Abai's Prayag pharmacy, and Abai now appealed to Pandit Nehru as an old friend from Allahabad. Just as Abai had requested Mahatma Gandhi, he requested Nehru to leave his political responsibilities, and as a popular gentleman of the world, engage the rest of your life in this organized spiritual movement to make a real adjustment of Western material science combined with Indian way of spiritual realization. As with his letter to Gandhi, his letter to Nehru went unanswered. Among Abai's former Bombay contacts was Mr. Harban Slal, a landlord who had once assured Abai that he would provide him lodging whenever he needed. In the summer of 1958, Abai went to call on Mr. Harban Slal, only to find that he had gone to the West. When Abai learned that Mr. Harban Slal was traveling not only on business, but on a cultural mission, his imagination seized on the idea of an Indian on a cultural mission to the West. He wrote to Mr. Harban Slal asking for a place to stay, but also presenting his own cultural mission. Abai knew that many Westerners respected Indian culture. He had heard from his German godbrother that although Indians who went to the West, especially to Germany, were well received, they were sometimes tested on their knowledge of Indian culture. So Abai advised Mr. Harban Slal to teach the real conclusion of Indian culture as he travelled. I think that people need this Indian message in this hour of necessity when the atomic bomb is hovering over the head of the human society. Please therefore begin the activities for the benefit of all people in the foreign countries since you have gone there. Clearly, Abai would have liked to have gone himself.
Abai also reminded Mr. Harban Slal of his promise to provide him with an apartment. I am passing my days in Bombay in great inconvenience for want of a suitable residential place, but the letter never caught up with the touring Mr. Harban Slal. Wanting to go to the West as soon as possible, Abai visited one of his godbrothers in Bombay, Kripa Sindhu, and asked him to help. Kripa Sindhu. He came to my house and asked me to help him in going to America. He gave me some back to Godheads, which he said I could show to people to ask for help on his behalf. I tried to do something in this regard. I introduced Abai Babu to one man, a big industrialist, Hemraj Khandelwala. I went also. The three of us sat down and I told the man how Abai wanted to go to the West and how he was a good devotee and was writing and doing so many things, but somehow or other the man did not help. Kripa Sindhu told Abai of how the Gaudiya Mat in Bombay had sometimes been assisted by a pious business magnate, Mrs. Shumati Moraji, head of Scindia Steamship Lines. Abai tried to see her but was unable. He did, however, see one of Mrs. Moraji's employees, a deputy manager for the Scindia Company, who heard him out and, to Abai's surprise, responded generously. Considering Abai a genuine sadhu, the Scindia agent offered him a 50% concession on a voyage from India to the United States. He even put it in writing. Abai immediately began arranging for his passport and visa, but he could not raise even half the fare. Back in 1956 in Delhi, he had been struggling and homeless, and now as he considered his last 2 years of travelling out of Vrindavan, he felt that his position hadn't really improved. Perhaps Krishna didn't want him to succeed in this way, but one positive thing he had gained, determination to go to the West and preach. Therefore, there he would surely meet with success. Alone and poor, Abai returned to Vrindavan. He was 62, but he wasn't thinking of retiring. More than ever, his mood was reflective and renounced. Because few people knew him, and because he wanted to write, he kept to himself. He enjoyed deep peace as a resident of Vrindavan. Outside his window, the sacred Yamuna flowed by in a peaceful panorama for his private audience. The Keshigat neighborhood was quiet, though in the pre-dawn he could hear a few devotees bathing and chanting. When the moon was full, the river seemed like a coolly resplendent jewel, and in the morning the sun would appear like a red smudge, a fire burning through an opaque wall, at last bursting forth and clearing the entire sky, until in the hot blaze of noon, while the room would be in shadows, Abai could see from his window a shimmering sun high in the sky and glittering across the silver sheet of the gentle water. Without so much as leaving his room, from his doorway he could see hundreds of temples clustered together for miles in the friendly town of Vrindavan. The various punctual kirtans and bell ringings in the temples, the spontaneous songs to Lord Krishna in numerous homes, and in the streets rose and filled the air with devotion. On the veranda, Abai could chant japa, and there would be no interruption. He enjoyed a simple, almost carefree life of minimized physical wants, a few hours of rest at night, a little prasadam at noon, the simplest clothing, and he did not have to flatter anyone, support anyone, or manage anyone's life. His mind and intelligence were free and dwelt constantly on his service to his spiritual master. He saw his present circumstances as a preparation for a greater task before him. Despite his advanced age, he felt that he had barely begun his work. Yet he felt confident. He had his vision of a world association of devotees. It was not an idle dream, although he was not certain how it would all come about, but he knew his duty. For the present, he would go on describing his vision, the vision of his predecessor spiritual masters, in articles and books. But as soon as possible, he should go to the West. Westerners, he had concluded, were not satisfied with a materially comfortable life devoid of spiritual understanding. More than his fellow Indians, they would be open to the message of the absolute truth. He knew he should go, and he would go if Krishna desired. Abai lived frugally in Vrindavan, keeping exact account of every expenditure and every receipt. He carefully kept a ledger, just as if he were running a substantial business, even though his purchases were only a little milk, a few vegetables, charcoal for cooking, bus rides, and his major expenditure, postage. Somebody else I'd like to read?
A boy composed a Bengali poem, Vrindavan Banja, and its opening stanzas were especially self-respective and personal. When I'm sitting alone in Vrindavan Dham. In this mood, I'm getting many realizations. I have my wife, sons, daughters, grandsons, everything, but I have no money, so they are a fruitless glory. Krishna has shown me the naked form of material nature. By his strength, it has all become tasteless to me today. Yasyaham anugrahanami rasya tad dharanam sanjay I gradually take away all the wealth of those upon whom I am merciful. How was I able to understand this mercy of the All-Merciful? Everyone has abandoned me, seeing me penniless. Wife, relatives, friends, brothers, everyone. This is misery, but it gives me a laugh. I sit alone and laugh. In this Maya samsara, who do I really love? Where have my loving father and mother gone now? And where are all my elders who were my own folk? Who will give me news of them? Tell me who. And all that is left of the family life is a list of names. As the froth on the seawater mixes again with the sea, Maya samsara's play is just like that. No one is mother or father or personal relative. Just like the sea foam, they remain but a short time. Just as the froth and seawater mixes again in the sea. The body made of 5 elements meets with destruction. How many bodies does the embodied soul take in this way? His relatives are related merely to the temporal body. But everyone is your relative brother on the spiritual platform. This relationship is not tinged with the smell of Maya. The Supreme Lord is the soul of everyone. In relation to him, everyone in the universe is the same. All your relatives, brother, all the billions of jivas. When seen in relation to Krishna, they are all in harmony. Forgetting Krishna, the jiva desires sense gratification, and as a result, he is firmly grasped by Maya. On October visit to Delhi, a boy received a donation from Kaviraj Baidya Nasicha to be used for printing 1,000 copies of Back to Godhead. A boy promptly produced an October 20 issue of Back to Godhead with the donor's name on the front page. It was the first issue in 2 years. Another donor, Mr. Sabab Kumar Kapoor of Ramanal Kapoor and Sons, followed Mr. Sichar's example and donated 1,000 copies for the November 20 issue. The front page article in the November issue was Truth and Beauty, an editorial in the Times of India speculating on whether truth and beauty were compatible. Had opinion the truth was not always beautiful, but often ugly and unpleasant. A boy disagreed. Truth is so beautiful that many sages, saints, and devotees have left everything for the sake of truth. But we are habituated to love untruth from time immemorial in the name of truth. A boy agreed, however, that mundane truth and beauty were incompatible. Not only was mundane truth not beautiful, it was not truth. And mundane beauty was not real beauty. To explain, a boy told the story. Once a man fell in love with a beautiful girl and tried to resist the man's advances. When he persisted, she requested he wait for 7 days, after which she would accept him. During the 7 days, the girl took a strong purgative and laxative and repeatedly passed through and vomited. She stored the refuge in buckets. Thus, the so-called beautiful girl became lean, thin like a skeleton, and turned blackish in complexion, and the beautiful eyeballs were pushed into the sockets of the skull. The man appeared on the scene well dressed and well behaved and asked the waiting girl, who was depressed in appearance, about the beautiful girl who called him there. The man could not recognize the waiting girl as the same beautiful girl whom he was asking for. The same girl, however, was in a pitiable condition, and the foolish man, in spite of repeated assertion, could not recognize her. It was all due to the action of the medicine only. Alas, the girl told the powerful man all the story of her beauty and told him that she had separated the ingredients of her beauty and stored them up in reservoirs. She also told him that he could enjoy the juices beauty stored in the reservoirs. The mundane, poetic, or lunatic man agreed to see the juices of beauty, and thus he was directed to the store of loose stool, liquid vomit, which were emanating unbearable bad smell, and thus the whole story of liquid beauty was disclosed to him.
Abai went on to assert that literature which did not describe the ultimate truth and beauty of the Supreme Person was no better than stool and vomit, even though it be presented as poetry and philosophy. Standard morality, Abai explained, morality is the standard of activity by which the supreme authority is satisfied. Scriptures contain moral codes forbidding unholy sex relations, animal slaughter, intoxication, and gambling. Abai attributed Mahatma Gandhi's success as a public leader to his observance of these moral principles. Abai also praised the Vedic system of marriage. After the attainment of puberty, a woman wants a male, and if she is not married within that time and allowed to mix up with boys, it is quite natural that there is every chance of fall down either by the boy or the girl. Despite changing social conditions, Abai argued, you cannot indulge in unholy connection with the opposite sex just because the social conditions have changed, because unholy connection with women is the beginning of all immorality. In Scholars Deluded, Abai presented a critical review of Dr. Radhakrishna's edition of Bhagavad Gita, citing specifically the 34th verse of the 9th chapter, wherein Lord Krishna declares that one should always think of him and become his devotee. Dr. Radhakrishnan had commented, it is not the personal Krishna to whom we have to give ourselves up utterly, but the unborn, beginningless eternal who speaks through Krishna. Although the obvious meaning of Bhagavad Gita was that one should surrender to Krishna, the Supreme Person, personalists like Dr. Radhakrishnan observed the direct meaning with their word juggling. On the disappearance day of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, Abai keenly felt separation from his spiritual master. He perfectly understood that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's instructions were more important than his physical presence, and that in fact the spiritual master was present within his instructions. In this way, Abai had always been with his spiritual master, yet on this annual day, Abai could not help feeling lost. He remembered how in 1932 he had been a Grihasta and a new disciple. At that time, he had not been free to do as much service as now, yet he had been in those years and had been able to see his spiritual master, offer obeisance before him, eat the remnants of his prasadam, walk beside him, hear his voice, receive his personal glance. Abai thought of their meetings together. How powerful had been Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's mission. His presses had been running day and night, printing magazines, books. The daily Nadia Prakasha and Europe had been a promising new preaching field. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta at the helm, the Gaudiya Math had entered into battle against Maya's forces, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had made all his disciples unafraid. Abai had always been eager to serve his spiritual master, serve within the Gaudiya Math with its headquarters in Calcutta, but exactly how he would serve had never been clear to him until his last letter from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Abai looked back on the more than 20 years since his spiritual master's disappearance. The Gaudiya Math had been undone by its leaders, and everyone else had scattered like leaves in a storm. It was an unspeakable loss, and it was an old story. How the big sannyasis had disregarded their spiritual master's instructions and had intrigued, disputed, and litigated. Violent party factions, false leaders claiming to be welfare, and which part had been right. No, both had been wrong, all wrong because the Gaudiya Math had disintegrated. Now there were dozens of little maths and no preaching, no real preaching as before. And when he, Simha Guru, had cast fear into the Mayavadis, had led an army of young, powerful preachers to march throughout India and the world, and the greatest sufferers of the Gaudiya Math's dissolution were the people, the non-devotees, who had little hope of being delivered from the batterings of iron. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had begun a spiritual revolution, but that revolution had now been overthrown by Maya. The scattered particles of the Gaudiya Math had settled quietly into self-satisfied, insular, almost omnipotent units, and it was the people in general who suffered. Abai groped after memories of his spiritual master. He felt secure in that his own relationship with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was intact. Continuing, yet he felt helpless. He was diligently pursuing his spiritual master's order to preach in English, yet without his spiritual master's physical presence, he felt small and very much alone. Times like this, he questioned the wisdom of having left his family and business.
Do you want me to continue? Lamenting Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's absence and the fall of the Gaudiya Mat, he composed a Bengali poem, Viraha Astaka. Srila Prabhupada, you are always compassionate towards the suffering jiva souls. On this occasion of your separation, I see only dejection, an unlimited ocean of mercy, cutting an illusion. Nityananda distributed an ocean of flood of love of God. The Jati Goshai stopped the stream, but coming yourself, Lord, you revealed this illusion. So once again, everyone was immersed in the flood of love, even one so fallen, insignificant, and sinful as I. On the strength of Lord Chaitanya's order, you sent all of your servants door to door as gurus. There was preaching everywhere, from the sea to the Himalayas. Now, in your absence, everything is darkness. O Srila Prabhupada, you are always compassionate towards the suffering jiva souls. On this occasion of your separation, I see only dejection. In the same way that Advaita Prabhu brought Lord Gaura, so did Bhaktivinoda pray. His enthusiasm brought you. On the strength of his enthusiasm, you came and made everyone understand that India is a holy land. One who takes his birth in the land of Bharata must make his life perfect and then preach to others. This Mahamantra message you preached everywhere. Now in your absence, Lord, everything is darkness. Your ocean of compassion has again been stopped. This spear of great misery has cut through my heart. Without Lord Chaitanya's message, there is just confusion. Seeing this, all the Vaishnavas feel pangs of separation. The conditioned souls are all in darkness once again. They are searching for peace but are dying in an ocean of anxiety. O Srila Prabhupada, you are always compassionate towards the suffering jiva souls. On this occasion of your separation, I see only dejection. Abhai's was a dark view. The golden era of preaching that had flourished in the days of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati was no longer. By the influence of Maya, Abhay wrote, now everything is darkness, all devotional instructions have been destroyed, now everything has been reversed. Meditating on that great personality possessed of the divine power to save the entire world, Abhay expressed his feelings of weakness and helplessness. Because of those not fixed in devotional service, many branches have spread all over. Your conclusive message did not touch the ear. Where will I get the strength for the Sankirtan movement? How could he, a tiny spiritual child, survive without his spiritual father? Now who could save the world, which was so much more oppressed than ever before? Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had said that a dead man could not preach. Only one with life could preach. As long as Abhay and others could deeply regret the Gaudiya Mat's failure, there was still life and still hope. If everyone obtained this right and went out and made disciples, then the suffering souls in the world could be saved. It was useless to cry over what his god brothers had done, yet in seeing and resenting it, Abhay found, without the pain of what might have been, a continuing spark of what still might be. Abhay sent this poem and Vrindavan Bhajan to Keshava Maharaja, who published them in the Gaudiya Patrika. One night, Abhay had a striking dream, the same dream he had had several times before during his days as a householder. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati appeared, just as Abhay had known him, the tall, scholarly sannyas, coming directly from the spiritual world, from Krishna's personal entourage. He called to Abai and indicated that he should follow. Repeatedly he called and motioned. He was asking Abai to take sannyas. Come, he urged, become a sannyas. Someone else want to continue?
Okay. Abai awoke in a state of wonder. He thought of this instruction as another feature of the original instruction Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati had given him at the first meeting in Calcutta, the same instruction that his spiritual master had later solidified in a letter. Become an English preacher and spread Krishna consciousness throughout the Western world. Sannyas was for that end. Otherwise, why would his spiritual master have asked him to accept it? Abai reasoned that his spiritual master was saying, now take sannyas and you will actually be able to accomplish this mission. Formerly, the time was not right. Abai deliberated cautiously. By accepting sannyas, a Vaishnava dedicates his body, mind, and words totally to the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, renouncing all other engagements. He was doing that already. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati had offered sannyas to his leading disciples so that he could continue his mission. They hadn't done it. Preaching in the West had proved perilous even for the Gaudiya Mat's most recognized sannyasis. How could he, a mere householder, presume he could succeed where the others had failed? He was hesitant. The helpless, incapable feeling he had expressed in his Vira Astaka was there, but now his spiritual master was beckoning him. Over all other considerations, even over natural humility. Now, although he was elderly and alone, the desire to preach just as his spiritual master had preached remained within him. A fierce, though sometimes quietly expressed determination. The Vedic standard and the example set by the previous acharyas was that if one wanted to lead a preaching movement, sannyas was required. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had taken sannyas to facilitate his missionary work. Lord Chaitanya had taken sannyas to further the Sankirtan movement. Of course, Lord Chaitanya was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but when his young students had been disrespectful towards him, treating him as an ordinary man, he had taken sannyas. Because the sannyasi is automatically respected, Lord Chaitanya's acceptance of sannyas was a calculated tactic. As soon as he began travelling throughout India as a sannyasi, he immediately attracted thousands of followers to the Sankirtan movement. Knowing that many cheaters would accept the saffron dress and abuse the respect given to sannyasis, Lord Chaitanya had advised against accepting sannyas in the age of Kali. He knew that cheaters, in the guise of sadhus, would act immorally, accumulate funds for their own sense gratification, and make many followers simply to enhance their own prestige. Posing as swamis, they would cheat the public. Because the people in Kali Yuga are unable to follow the rules and regulations of sannyas, Lord Chaitanya had recommended that they simply chant Hare Krishna. However, if a person could actually follow the rules, and especially if he had to spread the Sankirtan movement, sannyas was necessary. Abai first had to approach one of his godbrothers for permission. He decided to turn to Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj, formerly Kundari Hari, the leader of the Chaitanya Mat in Calcutta. Abai still thought of the Chaitanya Mat as the headquarters of his spiritual master's mission. During the heated legal disputes, the Chaitanya Mat had been the most prized acquisition, and since 1948 it had been under the legal ownership of Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj. Now, although each sannyasi had his own place or places, the Chaitanya Mat and Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj legally represented the Gaudiya Mat entity. Abai felt that if he were to take sannyas and go preach in America, he could give the Chaitanya Mat the first opportunity to support his work. In April 1959, Abai wrote to Tirtha Maharaj, inquiring about sannyas and the Chaitanya Mat printing some of his manuscripts. And since no one was going abroad, he volunteered to do so on behalf of the Chaitanya Mat. Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj replied that Abai should first join the Chaitanya Mat. He mentioned the strife that still lingered. Those who are acting against Chaitanya Mat, they are motivated by their individual ambitions. Anyone who was against the Chaitanya Mat, he said, was acting illogically and against the instructions of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So according to Tirtha Maharaj, the thing for Abai to do, the thing that he had neglected to do for so many years, was to join the Chaitanya Mat and act under his direction. Tirtha Maharaj mentioned several members of the Chaitanya Mat who had recently accepted the sannyas order, and he said that Abai could also become one in time. He invited Abai to come reside at the Chaitanya Mat. The houses that we have, there are rooms that are airy and well lit. We will treat you exclusively. There won't be any difficulty. We will take care that no inconveniences are caused. But as for printing books, we are eagerly awaiting to print the books like Satsandarbha Vedanta, based on devotional service, and many other rare books by the Goswamis. First we will print them. Books written by you will be checked by the editorial staff, and if the funds can be raised, then they can be printed according to priority. The books will be printed only if they are favourable for the service of the Chaitanya Mat. Therefore, if the fund is raised, then there is a plan to go abroad as well. So, yeah, I'll finish there.
Abai was not encouraged. The main difficulty he felt was the Chaitanya Mat's shortage of funds. Srila Prabhupada, I was working with my broken typewriter. I went to our Tirtha Maharaj. You give me a room and print my books. Give me some money. I will join you. I had thought this is Guru Maharaj's institution. He did not say no, but the printing of books was a difficult task for him. He had no money. He was hardly collecting for maintaining. Printing of books is a big job, and there is no guarantee of sale. Without printing books and going to the West, sannyas did not have meaning for Abai. And who knew when Tirtha Maharaj would sanction his taking sannyas? There was no point in going to Calcutta just to reside in an airy, well-lit room. That he had already in Vrindavan. Abai wrote back to Tirtha Maharaj mentioning his direct order from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati to preach to the English-speaking people who wanted to go to the West right away, and he had thought the Chaitanya Mat would welcome his offer. Both Abai and Tirtha Maharaj had their responsibilities, but perhaps they could work together to carry out the desire of their spiritual master. Abai asked Tirtha Maharaj to reconsider. On May 7th, 1959, Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj wrote back, my suggestion is don't make any hasty decisions. For the time being, you stay with us and engage yourself in the service of the society, and then accept Tridanda, sannyas. The purpose of accepting Tridanda is to serve the society. If that is your desire, then Sri Chaitanya Mat will decide about your going to America to preach and make all the arrangements. It can never be the principle of the society to let one act according to his individual attempt or desire. The society will decide after consulting with the heads what is to be done by whom. This is what I want to say. First of all, it is necessary to identify oneself with the society. In order to preach in America or in other foreign countries, it is important to have a dignified organization in the background. And secondly, it is necessary to establish oneself in India before going to preach in the foreign countries. Now it is that there are no conferences or meetings in the West as before. Communication is done through the media of television. Abai could understand the needs and priorities of the Chaitanya Mat, but he could not allow them to overrule what he considered the highest mandate, preaching as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had ordered. Abai had offered his services to the leaders of the Chaitanya Mat, thinking they might also see things his way. He thought that with the world's crying need for Krishna consciousness staring them in the face, they might see that this Abai Babu was convinced and enthusiastic, and so should be sent right away with whatever he required. But they had other priorities. Abai next turned to Keshava Maharaj in Mathura, and Keshava Maharaj told Abai to take sannyas immediately. After corresponding with Tirtha Maharaj, Abai had felt some uncertainty about accepting sannyas. And now that he was being encouraged so strongly, he resisted. But Keshava Maharaj was insistent. Srila Prabhupada, I was sitting alone in Vrindavan writing. My godbrother insisted to me, Bhaktivedanta Prabhu, you must do it. Without accepting the renounced order of life, nobody can become a preacher. So he insisted. Not he insisted. Practically, my spiritual master insisted. He wanted me to become a preacher. So he forced me through this godbrother. You accept. So unwillingly, I accepted. Kesavaji Gaudiya Math was located in the midst of one of Mathura's downtown bazaars. Its main entrance, an arched doorway, led into a courtyard, open to the sky through a metal grating above. The architecture was similar to that of the Vamsi Gopalaji temple. The atmosphere was secluded, as in a monastery. Abai was a familiar, welcomed figure here. He had lived here, written and studied in the library here, edited the Gaudiya Patrika, and donated the deity of Lord Chaitanya, who stood on the altar beside the deities of Radha and Krishna, Sri Sri Radha Vinoda Vihariji. But his visit during September of 1959 was not an ordinary one. He entered the math dressed in white, Abai Babu, but he would soon be leaving dressed in saffron, a Swami.
Abai had been living as a renunciate for 9 years. There was no need for him to observe a ceremony or to proclaim himself a sadhu by changing to saffron dress. But it was the Parampara system that a man take Tridandi sannyas at the end of his life. He was aware of the cheating sannyasis. Even in Vrindavan, he had seen so-called sadhus who did not preach but simply spent their days hunting for chapatis. Some swamis of Vrindavan even indulged illicitly in what they had supposedly come here to reject, sex life. Such persons were making a mockery of sannyas. And there were the caste Goswamis also, who lived like ordinary householders, running temples as a business, to support their families and accepting honor and donations from the public on the false basis of birth. Abai knew of these abuses of sannyas, but he also knew the real purpose of sannyas. Sannyas was for preaching. On the morning of September 17th, 1959, in the 50 by 25-foot deity room on the second floor of the Keshavaji mat, a group of devotees sat before the deities of Radha Krishna and Lord Chaitanya. The deities were colourfully dressed in royal clothing and silver crowns. Radharani's right hand faced palm forward in benediction for the worshipper. At her side, her left hand held a flower for Krishna. Krishna stood like a dancer, placing his right leg in a casual tiptoe pose before his left, playing his long silver flute, which he held gracefully to his red lips. His long black hair reached down past his shoulders, and the garland of marigolds around his neck reached down to his knees. On his right stood the deity of Lord Chaitanya, his right arm raised, left arm at his side, his body straight, feet together. He was a soft golden colour, and he had large eyes, a well-formed red mouth, and straight black hair down to his shoulders. One level below the deities were pictures of the spiritual masters in disciplic succession: Jagannath Das Babaji, Bhakti Vinod Thakur, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, Bhakti Pragyana Keshava Maharaj. Abai sat on a mat of kusha grass beside 90-year-old Sanatan, also to receive sannyas that day. Sitting opposite the two candidates, Narayan Maharaj, Keshava Maharaj's disciple, prepared to conduct the ceremony of mantras and offerings of grains and ghee into the fire. Akinchana Krishna Das Babaji, Abhai's god brother, known for sweet singing, played mridanga and sang Vaishnav bhajans. Sitting on a raised asana, His Holiness Keshava Maharaj presided. Since there had been no notices for invitations, only the mat's few residents attended. Narayan Maharaj chanted the required mantras and then sat back silently while Keshava Maharaj lectured. Then, to everyone's surprise, Keshava Maharaj asked Abhay to speak. Abhay had not expected this. As he looked around at the gathering of devotees, he understood that the common language was Hindi. Only Keshava Maharaj and a few others spoke English, yet he knew he must speak in English. After Abhai's speech, each initiate received his sannyas danda. The traditional head-high staff made up of four bamboo rods bound together and completely enwrapped in saffron cloth. They were given their sannyas garments, one piece of saffron cloth for a dhoti, one for a top piece, and 2 strips for underwear. They also received tulsi neck beads and the sannyas mantra. Keshava Maharaj said that Abhay would now be known as Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj, and that Sanatan would be Muni Maharaj. After the ceremony, the 2 sannyasis posed for a photo, standing on either side of their sannyas guru, who sat in the chair. Keshava Maharaj didn't impose any strictures on Abhay. He simply encouraged him to go on preaching. Yet Abhay knew that to become A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami did not mean merely that he was giving up family, home comforts and business, that he had done 5 years ago. Changing from white cloth to saffron cloth, from Abhay Babu to Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj had a special significance. It was the mandate he had required, the irrevocable commitment. Now it was only a matter of time before Bhaktivedanta Swami would travel to the west, as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had ordained. This was Bhaktivedanta Swami's realization of his new sannyas status. The Gaudiya Patrika's account of the sannyas initiation included a biographical sketch of Sri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj's listing the major events of his life. The article concluded, seeing his enthusiasm and ability to write articles in Hindi, English and Bengali, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj gave him the instruction to take Tridandi sannyas. For nearly 1 year he had been ready to accept sannyas. In the month of Bhadra, on the day on which Vishvarupa accepted sannyas, Bhaktivedanta Swami at the Sri Keshavaji Gaudiya Mat accepted sannyas from the founder of the Vedanta Samiti, Bhakti Pragyana Keshava Maharaj. Seeing him accept his ashram of renunciation, seeing this pastime before accepting the renounced order of life, we have attained great affection and enthusiasm.
Okay. Hare Krishna. Seems like that's a good place to stop now. Everyone's okay with that. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I don't know if anyone's wants to share anything or yeah.
Well, I was remembering a bit about the Liquid Beauty story. Because I remember when I was 20 years old, I used to go to Soho Street Temple, and I remember they told that Liquid Beauty story, and you know, you I don't know, but you kind of think, you know, maybe that would put like young people off, that were, you know, young people were attracted to, you know, male, female sort of thing, you know, and it didn't put me off though. It was like it attracted me. I thought, yeah, that's the truth, you know, that's a realistic, you know, side of things, you know. I knew it was like, as when I was younger, I always felt this kind of pressure to have a relationship with a woman, you know. I felt this social pressure, you know, I wouldn't be accepted in society unless I had, you know, a girlfriend and things like that. And I could see what, you know, some some of the young ladies were like around, you know. And, you know, I was no great example myself, you know. So it was like, you know, when I heard that story, I was like, yeah, that's correct. I always remember when I was 20 on Soho Street hearing that story, and it was like, you know, it didn't put me off, it attracted me, because sometimes we may think, you know, when we're talking to people, you know, what's going to attract them, what's going to put them off, sort of thing, you know. So that attracted me. I was like, yeah, that's right, that's correct, that's the right way to see things, you know. So because we've kind of got to be careful, and you know what we're saying to attract people and things like that, and it not too easy, not too soft, but at the same time not too kind of cutting, and you know, like tell them something, you know, like you know what it's like. You know, when somebody first goes to a temple, it's like, you know, how they're spoken to and dealt with sometimes isn't exactly expert, you know. So yeah, I just thought I'd let people know that. I heard that story when I was 20 and I thought it was true, and I thought it did attract me rather than put me off, you know.
I remember hearing that when I first met devotees. It must have been very early on. I remember reading that. I remember thinking, well, that's a hell of a, because it's really like, but yeah, on paper, it's the kind of thing you would imagine would make you just run a mile. But
Yeah,
I heard it and I was like, I'm not sure what I thought at the time, but looking back, I think I had a lot of respect. I don't know if it was for Prabhupada or the devotees in general or just the move, but I was attracted because I thought, well, that's someone who's actually not afraid to just come out and say it, and
yeah.
not pandering to the truth. And also, I mean, I wouldn't have thought this at the time, but obviously not on the mental platform, because sometimes we look at people and we make some kind of judgment about what we think they're able to hear and what they're not able to hear. And quite often we haven't really, you know, I've found in the past, I've really underestimated people. And so we find that, I know I mentioned it a lot, but I mean, we were there last night, but at the university, and we talked to students, and we kind of got onto a point where sometimes the first week of the year in September, where we've just got a new group of students, we'll more or less just say, you know, in a few years you're all going to die, and everything you're doing at university, it's a waste of time. You're going to lose it. Your family, your car, your house, your degree, everything is going to vanish. And we're not telling them to give it up, but just to put it in perspective. So the best thing you can do is just chant Hare Krishna. You know, we explain it in more detail, but we just say that to them, and they love it. They actually love it, and I think they just like, it's refreshing to them, I think, just to hear someone say it plainly and have a bit of integrity, I suppose, and just be honest with them, because the whole world's, yeah, anyway, I could go on forever. But yeah, I kind of get that feeling with Prabhupada. Obviously, it's coming from such a good place. And he's like one of the only people I've ever met who's just got integrity, you know, he'll just say the truth.
Yeah.
And he's not afraid. Like, if people don't like him for that, then, well, what can he do about it? Yeah. So I thought it's amazing that a person will kind of jeopardize their status in society just by speaking the plain truth. It's quite amazing, actually, yeah. Especially for a young person, I think, who quite often young people, they see a lot of hypocrisy in society. You have that kind of rebellious streak, isn't it, in you? And so to see someone that's like got integrity is actually very appealing. Yeah. Of course, it's the way it's done, isn't it? I suppose, you know, because sometimes people can get really heavy and kind of enjoy, you know, that position of being able to say those things. But yeah, I thought it was interesting as well. He mentioned about scarcity of food, which is like a bit topical, right? Prabhupada was saying actually in society's not run properly on spiritual principles. I think he was saying you won't even be able to feed everybody. The people can't even all eat. I thought it's funny because that's more or less what's happening. Everyone's talking about it now, right? With the children's school meals and things like that. And so many people are so poor they can't feed their kids this week because they're not at school. So it was just making me think that it's still really important. What Prabhupada was going through, I don't know, what's that, 70 years ago or something? About 70 odd years ago. Still hasn't been sorted out yet. The job is still needs to be done, isn't it?
Yeah, we can't be too wishy-washy, you know. We gotta somehow, well, me personally, I like just, you know, there's a kind of like a bit of a mood of you know, don't be too much God and don't be too much Krishna, you know. But I like that, you know. I like getting to that point as quick as possible, sort of thing, you know. It's just that's the way I am as an individual, you know. But I can kind of pull it off like that because that's the way I'm at, and I've got faith, and that's the way I live, you know. I know other people that go about things in a different way, and they're very successful and they're very good, and they're very good at spreading Krishna consciousness. But I think everyone is an individual and everyone's got their own unique way of doing things, you know, and if we all kind of work together, you know, and then it can all like complement each other, you know. Nobody's sort of the major role, everybody's taking you know, an equal part sort of thing, you know. One couldn't work without the other sort of thing, you know. I like that sort of mood because, I mean, really it's Prabhupada's ISKCON, isn't it? It's Prabhupada's ISKCON, it's not my ISKCON, or, you know, Prabhupada's the leader, you know. He's like, he wants us all to cooperate and work together, doesn't he? And, you know, using intelligence, you know, and that way it'll be successful, you know. Because, I mean, we're all trying to do our bit, aren't we? And you're like, you know, what can I do? You know, I'm just, you know, I can't do much myself, you know. I mean, I've been involved for so long, and we've been distributing thousands upon thousands of books, doing festivals, everything, you know. And you're like, well, great, there's a movement, there's centers around, there's, you know, but, you know, I do feel, you know, we could get a lot more of the public, like chanting a bit of japa, following our principles a bit better, you know. Even if people are only chanting 2 rounds a day, if you get a lot of people doing that, it would make a big, big difference, you know. I feel we've got, you know, it's a certain group, you know, and we kind of need more kind of people taking part that aren't going to be sort of so full time, you know. They're not, and we've still got to treat them, you know, with respect, with, you know, if we treat people like that properly, they, even people that just give money, that don't chant or don't chant japa, if we cultivate them properly, they can go back to Godhead the same as anybody else can, you know. Because it does say in the Gita, doesn't it, chapter 12, do this, if you can't do this, do this, if you can't do that, do this. We, you know, I feel we could cultivate a lot more people like that. But in one sense, the movement is still young. It's only 50 years old. And, you know, the Prabhupada had to spread Krishna consciousness in whatever way he could. And the old system was, I mean, when I was 20, you just went to a temple, right? You didn't even have to know your end. You just, I was sort of hanging around. I was visiting the Soho Street Temple regularly for about 6 months. But nobody really knew me by name. A lot of young people used to go to the temple at that time. The temple was packed, right? Mainly for prasadam. We like young Italian, American, Scottish, English people. And, you know, they just asked me after about 6 months, I used to visit maybe once a week or something like that for about 6 months. Then he just asked me, do you want to go to back to Vedanta Manor and stay for a week, you know? And I said yes, and I stayed. And You know, within 3 weeks of staying, I was shaved up and in the temple. You know what I mean? Nobody really knew me there. You know, it was very like, you know, it was very quick in those days. It's just like get people in the temple shaved up and in a dhoti, you know, as quick as possible. But I think now we've got a bit more time to think about things, and, you know, we've got a bit more time to cultivate people, and, you know, I think the danger is relaxing into a comfortable situation, though, you know. Shama Sundar, the Prabhupada disciple that preached to George Harrison, he says that's a bit of a problem now. And I can see it as once you've got a comfortable situation, it is difficult to get out of it, you know. We've really got to, you know, make an effort. So, you know, it's like, you know, I feel we could do a lot more to cultivate people that doing 2 rounds or 4 rounds. And,
yeah, I think one thing we've noticed is that it's really important to make it clear, which probably wasn't then, is that it's very much possible to be Krishna conscious in your own home. And that whole so in order to kind of learn the art of practicing Krishna consciousness, you sort of, in one sense, you do need to live with bhaktas. You do need to spend time with people who are living Krishna consciousness, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be in a temple. So it's like people can live, like Prabhupada didn't actually live in a temple. He was trained at home by his father, and his dad was the example, like we were reading at the start. And Lilamrita, his dad was going to work and coming home for a couple of hours at lunch to do puja and take rest, and then, you know, so he wasn't formally trained like that. But the main principle is that we try and spend time with people who are living Krishna consciousness, and that can be in any of the ashrams. It doesn't really have to be necessarily like that. So it's important to try and make that accessible to everyone, I think. I think Hema had something. Did you want to?
Yeah, no,
I don't know if it was on that point or not.
No, it wasn't. It was a different point. Well, did Lucy or Mohammed, do you want to share anything first? Or...
I will after you. It's okay. You say first.
Okay. I just because I think towards the beginning we read Prabhupada's poem from the Vrindavan Bhajan, and I think every time we read this we pull out this point. But when he's talking about you know, where did his loving father go? Where's my mother gone? Where are my family? And then he says, all that is left of this family is just a list of names. And it's almost comical. Yeah. Like you can kind of, there's a bit of humor, like Prabhupada's humor is slightly
like dark humor.
Yeah, it's weird, it's like not like ha ha funny, but it always strikes me that point that a lot of that his family had just become a list of names, and that always strikes me. It's a small point.
Just on that point, sorry, I know Lucy was going to share something, but just while on, I know we mentioned on the weekend that Prabhupada's disappearance day is coming up, and I don't know if Bhaktivinoda Prabhu might have done this or not, but in my experience, not a lot of devotees do it, but just in my own experience. But actually singing Prabhupada's poems and songs, he wrote quite a few bhajans, and there's a book, I think the BBT published it, called A Shower of Divine Compassion.
I think so.
Or anyway, we probably got it somewhere, but it's a really amazing book, and it has all of Prabhupada's poetry in it, and so you can actually sing them as bhajans, and they're really powerful. So I was just wondering, maybe on that day we might do something to get together via Zoom and sing some of those songs and hear some pastimes there. But anyway, sorry Lucy, I know you were going to share something, but I just thought I'd mention it, that actually singing those poems, like those bhajans, is really powerful.
Yeah, you get to know Prabhupada.
Yeah,
that's, I think it is
very important.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. was about the poems. I was going to say how I love the poems. The one about missing his spiritual master as well. I thought it gave you a real window into his inner world, and I like that. I really enjoyed listening to them. So yeah, I would definitely like to hear more of them for sure.
Yeah, they're amazing, and it always struck me that they say like the heart of a pure devotee is like a window into the spiritual world, and with Prabhupada in particular, because he's our acharya, he's come here to teach us Krishna consciousness. Like he's actually the individual person we're supposed to be following. You know, he's the actual he's like the example for everyone of like the perfect devotee for us. You know, and he's come here specifically for us. So there's like a very specific relationship that we have, that because the guru is one in one sense, but he's also very specifically, you know, he's a very particular person. He's an individual personality in another. So when we have all those poems from Prabhupada, it's like you can get to know the heart of the person we're supposed to be following, how you're supposed to practice Krishna consciousness, and what our mood, you know, different moods should be, and like it's actually like quite an amazing resource. I was really surprised when I found the book. I thought, I can't believe that isn't a big thing. I've thought, you know, surely we should all be sitting around singing these. I don't know if I've made a mistake somewhere or if I've missed out something. I don't know, but yeah, it's really nice to be able to have that intimate relationship with Prabhupada. He kind of makes himself available to us like that.
Yeah, the poem that Prabhupada wrote when he first arrived in Boston, I think it is. It's like about 16 verses, but it's the one that includes I'm a puppet, I'm your puppet, Krishna, make me dance, and it's just kind of like really desperate. It doesn't know whether to turn left or turn right, or you know, it's just like so dependent on Krishna. Just I'm here now, do your will.
Yeah,
Nice sentiment.
yeah.
Like Guru Maharaj always goes through that poem and gives that whole like 2-hour class on that.
Wow. Oh, I'd love to hear that. That'd be amazing. Yeah. I remember in Brighton actually once, your Guru Maharaj gave a whole presentation about Prabhupada. Yeah, the whole thing with slides and everything. It was really ecstatic, telling Prabhupada's story, but also like explaining to us like who he is in relation to us and the whole parampara and everything. Really put, you know, gave you, you know, what's the word that you go, put Prabhupada in the right perspective, gave you a real powerful kind of presentation of who Prabhupada is, and yeah, astonishing. Yeah, it's amazing when he comes off the boat. I mean, spoiler alert, you know, but it's amazing when
he came in a boat.
Yeah, he comes off the boat and he literally said, "I don't know if I should turn left or turn right." He's got no idea, dependent on Krishna. Yeah, it's like really far out. Yeah, I don't think we're too far off reading that actually. Yeah. So I'll find out the date of when his disappearance day is, and maybe we'll post something in the group. We'll try and arrange something during the day or in the evening or something.